Hey everyone, welcome back to the District 3 podcast. My name is Irvin.
And this is Elena.
And Mix is not here this week.
He is not.
I don't know what's going on. Just kidding. He texted us that he couldn't make it. But we missed
He was
Mix.
sick for a couple days.
Yeah, I don't think he ever told us like what he got sick of. But
everyone's getting sick right now.
Yeah, I'm scared of like that norovirus.
I'm scared of all of it.
One of the things I should go get my other COVID vaccine. I haven't gotten a vaccine in like a year, and I need to go get another one and get the flu vaccine as well.
Yeah.
But there really isn't any protection with like the norovirus. They're just saying that you get it, you throw up, you have diarrhea. It's like you can't really fight it.
Yeah.
The only thing that people suggest is that you wash your hands.
You wash your hands. I also read something that it could stay in your clothing. The virus can stay in your clothing.
That's
so
scary.
Yeah, it's highly transferable and stuff like.
You know, I had been working out at home, and I started going to the gym like this month.
I saw that you took a picture with Duke in it. And he was like your workout partner. That's cute.
like I've been working out at home for like maybe like 4 or 5 months, but like I have like an ongoing gym subscription that I wasn't using, and I was literally giving the gym like $20 every month for free. So like I funded someone's scholarship to go to the gym even though no one used it. And I was like, let me just start going. And I was preparing for the gym to be full, just like it is at the beginning of the year. But there was no one there. And I think maybe because like the gym that I go to, which is like the Fayetteville Athletic Club, it's really old. And it's one of those like gritty gyms where like people, the only people that like going there are people that don't want to be around other people and the people that just enjoy those old school gyms.
Interesting. I get a free membership for there. I've never been there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I've never been there, but I've always heard great things about it. You're the first person to describe it the way it has.
Wait, are we talking about the same place? It might not be the same one.
The Fayetteville Athletic Center? It is off of like
I think I'm confusing
Zion?
it. I'm confusing it then. Then the one that I'm talking about is the Northwest Athletic Club. It's the one that's over there by Lake Fayetteville.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
It's
about.
like
that looks scary.
Damn, I didn't want to say that. But it was built in 1979, and so it's an old gym, and like
I've always wondered if it's an actual gym because I always drive by and I'm like, is that a real gym or not?
And I think it's just dudes that go there. To be honest, the only girl that I ever saw there was Suzuki from Univision, but she left and she goes to a different gym now.
Yeah, she goes everywhere. She's about that life.
From Telemundo, not Univision. I started going there and I'm touching all the equipment. I'm like, I'm risking it because then I checked online and the norovirus can't be protected by like hand sanitizer. Like you can't protect yourself against the norovirus by hand sanitizer or by those wipes that you clean stuff with. The only thing that you can do is like wash your hands.
Soap and water.
But then my phone touches things over there, and then like parts of my hand touch some of the machine. Like if I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get it, and I'm a little scared. I don't like the idea of throwing up. It scares me.
Yeah. Being sick like that does suck. Like, throwing up and pooping.
And I've been hearing just people like talk about that. They're like, oh, well, I got it. It's like it lasts like 48 hours to 3 days, and you just don't stop throwing up, and you don't start. Yeah. And you don't start going to the bathroom. And I'm like, man, that's scary. But here's to hoping that none of us get it.
And if anyone has gotten sick, thoughts and prayers. But you hopefully you're making it through.
I haven't heard anybody die from norovirus, which is good.
Yeah.
At least locally.
But it still sucks. Yeah.
So hopefully, if anybody's listening and you're sick,
stay protected.
Like I hope you get better soon. And but Elena, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you for a little bit. How's expected dates coming soon?
Yeah, I've got like 7 weeks left.
Late February, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know the gender yet.
I don't know. I found out that is called being Team Green. I'm Team Green.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you do know the name, but you don't share it with anybody until...
No, we just did that with Cielo.
Okay.
Because we didn't know what Cielo's name was going to be.
Do you already know the name?
Well, I don't know what the baby's going to be. So.
Oh, that's true.
But we'll wait. Okay. We'll wait to share baby's name once baby's here.
We'll wait then. We'll wait for that. But let's go ahead and bring on our guest. He's a good friend of the podcast. I think we've had him on before, haven't we, Nathan?
I don't think so. I think this.
Oh, this is your first time, Nathan?
Yeah,
oh my God! I thought
Long
you had been
listener,
here.
Though.
I thought you had been here before. But joining us is immigration attorney and a good friend of myself and a lot of community members. Lawyer Nathan Bogart, attorney Nathan Bogart. Thank you for joining us today, Nathan.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And I know that you've been doing a lot of social media. I see the TikTok. I see the Reels. Why did you think it was important to start doing that? To start just being more out there on socials?
Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons, right? I mean, the first is, I run a business, so I gotta promote it. I gotta make sure the information's out there. But the second reason, and probably really the bigger issue, is just there's so much bullshit online about immigration law specifically. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to put a little bit of a spotlight on what we do and how we do it, and kind of walk people through the why of what we do, and hopefully people can be a little bit better educated.
Yeah, I think because you're very active on TikTok, and then I see you've been getting more active on Reels recently, haven't you?
Yeah.
Because I think TikTok was more of your thing.
It was. It definitely was.
And now you made the move to Reels. That's a lot to do on social media. Because I know with the podcast, sometimes like even for us three, we're like, damn, like we have to post this, and this, and this, and this, and you're posting all over the place. How are you managing that?
I just record one video and post it on everything.
Have you found that website yet that you can post it one place and it goes everywhere, or not yet?
Yeah, there's websites like that. I don't use them because sometimes I like to use a little bit different messaging on different sites. But we'll see. Maybe I'll go ahead and invest in that sometime down the road.
Yeah, we need to look into that ourselves. But in the meantime, when we post on Instagram, it posts on Facebook too, so
right.
that helps.
Sometimes we found out the Reels don't.
A post, like a video post, doesn't. Sometimes Reels do. It happened like one time where it posted, and I'm like, I don't know how this happened. But I tried posting a video today, like the one that I put with Diana Gonzalez-Worthen, and it only posted on our Instagram.
Yeah.
It didn't post on the Facebook, and it wouldn't give me the option to do it. So some of these social media things, you kind of have to like sit down and like learn about how things work. Which, and now there's going to be a new one. That new, what are they calling? Is it red tone that people are talking about? That they're going to ditch TikTok once it gets banned. I feel like
the real Chinese TikTok.
Yeah, it's called Red Tone.
Red Note.
Not Red Tone. My bad. That shows you how much I know. But I've been hearing that people are moving over there too. Have you already gotten an account yet?
I haven't gotten an account over there yet.
I feel like every year there's something happens that TikTok's gonna get banned this one year. So we all prepare in some way, and then it doesn't happen. But this kind of seems like the closest that we've gotten to like.
The Supreme Court was supposed to make an announcement today if they did have a ruling.
Okay.
There wasn't anything.
Because the 19th is supposed to be the last day, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, of TikTok.
Is it actually going to go though?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like it. I think there's an option, for an American-based company to invest in TikTok and keep it alive that way. And I've seen some news stories about different moguls who've expressed
Elon, Mr.
like
Beast,
exactly.
Even the rapper Meek Mill said that he wanted to buy TikTok. Isn't it like I think I think it was like 50 billion that they're saying is the price for it at the moment. So you'd have to get a lot of investors on that.
50 billion.
50 billion. That's like what. Probably like a little bit closer to, Jeff Bezos is more richer than 60 billion, but he used to be at like Bill Gates, I think.
Yeah, that's
it's
a
like
lot
his
of
entire
money.
Bill Gates' entire net worth.
Have you been able to like connect with a lot more people through TikTok and stuff?
I was really surprised how quick TikTok kind of blew up. Yeah, so I've traditionally always just used Facebook for my social media marketing. It just seems to be where most of my clients are more active, and we've had an Instagram presence for a long time, but it just doesn't get as much traction. And so I really started pushing TikTok maybe about a year ago, and if even that, and it blew up pretty quick.
Were you able to did you have like a general idea of what most people's questions were, but once you got on there, did you like learn new? Like, oh, I didn't think people thought about that.
I thought I did because, I do consultations most days, and I thought I'd just answer the questions I'm answering in consultations and keep it easy. But that wasn't getting anywhere. What really, the videos that get the most views is when I just take a video of myself as I'm getting ready to go to court in the morning, and I just say, hey, I'm going to be in court doing X, Y, Z. We'll see what happens. And those get like thousands of views. And, when I work on like some crazy video collage, or when I do a formal sit down and answer a question, no one pays attention.
I think hopefully eventually in the future you can like take someone with you to film you. I think it'd be cool to see that perspective, because usually it's you filming it, which is cool too. But like maybe shooting you like going into the court, or I'm not sure if you're allowed to film in court or not. Are you allowed to film?
No, you
in
can't film in court.
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe not in court, but like going into the court.
And immigration court is different from a lot of other courts.
Yeah, there's some courts where I'm sure it's fine to film in. Maybe not, as a private attorney, but certainly they let media into the courtroom. Immigration courts are technically open to the public, but we are not supposed to be recording what's going on in there. So the most I've ever done has been to record a video walking into the building that houses the court, but I've never actually recorded anything inside the court.
And you're like an Arkansas attorney practicing immigration, deportation law, but there is no immigration court in Arkansas.
There's not a single one in Arkansas. Technically, for people who are not in a detention center, the immigration court that has jurisdiction over Arkansas is Memphis. Mm-hmm. So Memphis has jurisdiction over the entirety of the states of Arkansas and Tennessee, and then I think everything in Mississippi north of Jackson.
That sounds like there's a backlog.
Oh, yeah. There's 15 judges, I think, right now in Memphis, and there's still a multi-year backlog.
And then if you get clients from Oklahoma or Missouri, you're looking at something different, right?
Exactly. So all my Oklahoma clients end up going to Dallas, and all of my Missouri clients go to Kansas City, which is even of the three courts that I spend most of my time in, Memphis, Kansas City, and Dallas. Kansas City is by far the most backlogged. And then anyone who's detained generally ends up in one of the detained immigration courts in Louisiana. We've got a couple of those.
Yeah. You go out down to New Orleans close.
Fortunately, it's not New Orleans. It's more like the middle of nowhere, the middle of the jungle.
Send you out to the boonies.
Yeah.
I've seen the places you go. I'm like, man, this looks isolated.
It is, and I think that's kind of the point. You know, you keep people separated from their family, their friends, their support groups, their attorneys.
Yeah.
You know, I never thought about that until you said that. I think a few days ago, where I heard you say that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. You know, to isolate people and make it just more difficult for even a family member to like properly fight for someone that's detained.
Especially when someone gets picked up in Arkansas and you're like, where are they? You'd think they're somewhere in Arkansas.
Absolutely.
And
you
they're
think
not.
so. They're not. No. And they may be temporarily. You know, they may end up in, there's a few different, county jails that will, serve as stopping points for people as they're being funneled down to the detention centers. But it's very short, the amount of time that they're going to stay in the state of Arkansas.
So one of the main reasons why we wanted you to come to the podcast, Nathan, is to speak about like know your rights. Just had some questions, just for general questions that people might have, just because with the administration coming in, by the time this episode comes out, the administration would have already been in, and there's just been a lot of rumors and speculation, and then some direct quotes from the Trump administration on what they want to do with undocumented immigrants. So I just kind of wanted to educate our community, our public, our audience about like what they can do in situations legally. You know, how can they protect themselves? How can they protect their family members? So I'm just going to ask you just some general questions, and if you can just answer them to the best of your ability. I wanted to start with, when ICE shows up to your house, when an ICE officer shows up to your house, what can you do? What should you do? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm going to start out by evading the question first and just say that in most cases, ICE probably isn't going to show up at somebody's house. It definitely happens. There's not a doubt in my mind about that. I've seen it happen numerous times over the course of my career. But generally speaking, ICE prefers to work with local law enforcement and just pick up people who have already been detained by the police for, infractions as meaningless as driving without a license or speeding, to whatever crime they may or may not have committed. So when they show up at the house, a lot of times it's because you have an outstanding deportation order or removal order or some other complication in the case. But if they do show up at the house, the first thing you got to realize is, just like any other law enforcement agency, ICE needs to have a warrant if they want to actually enter the home without your permission. So the first thing I would recommend is just don't open the door. You don't even really have to talk to them, but if you're going to talk to them, if you're going to be brave and do that, do it through a window, communicate with them some other way, but do not open the door and do not let them into the home. Now, if they do have a document that they purport to be a warrant, you're going to want to have them pass that through a window or underneath the door, and you're going to want to look at it. Most of the warrants that ICE uses when they go to arrest somebody are what we call administrative warrants or administrative arrest warrants. And they are not signed by a judge. They are not the same as an arrest warrant that maybe the police or the FBI would have when they come to raid somebody's home or business. They're just going to be a piece of paper signed by a supervisory officer, nothing more. And that does not authorize ICE to enter any space without permission. Now, there may be some exceptions, if they come accompanied with actual police officers from, the town that the individual is living in, they may have an actual judicial warrant. Or if somebody's serving probation and as part of their probation agreement, they've already agreed to allow law enforcement into their homes, then they may be able to come in that circumstance. But generally speaking, you always want to look at that piece of paper. But even then, even if they get into the home, even if, you decide to talk to them through the door, you really don't have to say a lot to any ICE agent when they try and talk to you. Identify yourself, to show them your immigration documents if you have them, but you don't have to answer any questions about where you were born, what your nationality or ethnic heritage is. You don't have to answer questions about any crimes you may or may not have committed. You really don't have to say a whole lot. And my general advice would just be to keep your mouth shut in most of these encounters.
That makes sense. I think one of the things that I needed just a little bit more clarity on, which I told you a little bit off air that Myra was asking about, is like the specific order that the judge would sign. I feel like a lot of the times, from what I've heard, people will say, oh, they had a paper and the paper had a signature and it said like, I have to, well, they just saw the signature and they were like, this must be official. And we wanted to clarify once again that it has to be signed by either a judge from the county or a federal judge. If it's a document signed by a police officer, a USCIS judge, a Department of Homeland Security judge, those are still not valid, right?
No, they're not valid at all. And you're absolutely right. So, first and foremost, when you're talking about an actual judicial warrant, you're looking at something that was signed by a judge from the state of Arkansas or a federal judge from one of the federal district courts. Those are going to be who signs. And it's going to say something like Honorable Judge so-and-so, right, underneath the signature, most likely. It's probably not going to be vague. If you see any title that does not say judge or honorable, don't assume it was signed by a judge. And you don't necessarily have to assume it was signed by a judge anyways, because if they have a warrant to enter your home, they're going to do it.
Do you hear that a lot though from like clients and stuff that like they just saw an order and they decided to just open the door or go along, or what do you hear the most out of those situations?
What I hear the most is that people are afraid and they figure that, hey, if I cooperate, then this is all going to be over with really quickly. And so I'll just go ahead and let them in, or I'll go ahead and talk to them, or I'll answer whatever questions they have. And that's the worst possible thing that you can do generally in those situations.
That makes sense. And there's been the reason, I guess, what we were talking about this just from a few months ago was that locally there was a lot of situations happening with Marshallese people in this community that officers were showing up. And I don't know what type of officers they were. I just, heard that people showed up in black vehicles and people got taken from their homes, and then several of them ended up getting deported. And you were in those circles a lot of, those people. I know that people had conversations with you about that. So this isn't something that specifically targets the Latino community, which a lot of the times I feel like people think that it's just Latinos going through this. No, like Pacific Islanders are going through it too. And in some cases, even some European folks and some other Asian folks also. And I think it's important to note that it's not just a specific, like race or country of origin that ICE targets more.
Right. No,
yeah.
You're 100% correct. I mean, anyone who's an immigrant to the United States who has not naturalized and become a U.S. citizen is always going to have some element of risk. It doesn't matter what your country of origin is. It doesn't even matter if you're a lawful permanent resident. You may still end up being deportable at some point. So you've got to really take care of yourself. But, just right now in terms of my active docket in front of the immigration courts, yes, the vast majority of my clients tend to come from Latin America, probably El Salvador in first place, and followed pretty quickly by Mexico and the rest of Central America. But I have clients from Russia, China, Turkey.
Oh wow!
So yeah, I mean all the places, India, Africa. So all the places you've mentioned and more. This is something that can affect anybody, regardless of what part of the world they come from.
Is there any other kind of what are the most situations that you hear ICE involvement in this area? Is it in homes? Is it at jobs? What's the most activity that you've heard of, like in the past few years, where people make that, like, have interactions with ICE outside of their offices?
The county jails. Easily.
That makes sense.
Yeah, easily the county jails.
We were talking a little bit off air how the SCAP program exists in Washington County, and then 287G exists in Benton County and in Craighead County as well here in Arkansas. So those programs are still causing people to end up in deportation proceedings. One of the things that I wanted to talk about on this episode, which you've educated me a lot throughout the years, is in regards to, like, if an undocumented person gets jailed at the Washington County jail, or even I think Benton County as well, that it's not a good idea for their family member to pay their bail.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised by how many people don't know that. And I don't blame anybody, because I was working within the system with the Bail Project, so that and I have communication with a lot of immigration attorneys, so that's kind of how I know, right? But can you talk about that process, about like what happens if an undocumented person in these jails gets their bond paid by their family, like what that does with like ICE and stuff?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. It depends heavily on the circumstances, but you may consider not paying somebody's bond if they are an immigrant, not even just undocumented. If they're held, you need to be careful. So specifically, the issue that we're looking at is when ICE has placed a hold on any foreign national in a local jail. They have 48 business hours or 48 hours to pick up that individual once that individual becomes releasable from state custody. And, the things that make people releasable would include, having paid their bail or, having pled guilty or been found innocent, right? I mean, once their case is disposed of. And so once they're releasable, that clock starts to tick. And so a lot of people go in, they pay the bond, and Washington County or Benton County or wherever doesn't release them, and they're like, what's going on? And within the next 48 hours, ICE is there, and they take them and they run off.
Because ICE, and another thing that I want to clarify, because people right now, what's happening even as we speak, there's been ICE sightings in the area where people are seeing them. Right now, there's a rumor that there's one in Springdale. But ICE comes here all the time. And I think it's important for people to know that it's not always a raid. It's not always like a retene, know. And let's switch it up and talk a little bit Spanish, Nathan.
Okay.
Since you speak, tú hablas español también. Entonces, tú también sabes que migración viene aquí varias veces a la semana. Creo que 2 veces a la semana. Y mucha gente a veces se espanta porque ve los automóviles de migración. ¿Tú qué les dices a las personas cuando te dicen, creo que miré? No sé si la gente tiene conversaciones contigo sobre eso también. ¿Te dicen a ti o alguien te dice a ti cuando, o tienen algunas preguntas o algunos miedos cuando ven a inmigración en el área? O?
No tanto. A veces recibimos preguntas de personas simplemente tratando de confirmar que hay una redada o retén o chequeo, lo que sea de ICE. Pero normalmente no escuchamos estos rumores a menos que los escuchemos en las redes como ustedes. No es una parte, digamos, diaria de mi trabajo. En general, si alguien escucha cualquier rumor, pues puede evitar el área en que supuestamente ICE esté operando. Pero ICE sí viene aquí de vez en cuando, pero también tiene una oficina
en
aquí en Fayetteville.
Yeah.
¿No? Está al lado de Sam's Club. So, no está muy lejos de donde estamos ahora. So siempre hay una presencia de ICE en esta región.
And so, and besides people like police officers / ICE showing up to people's houses, they can show up to people's work as well. What would you advise if there is an undocumented person in a work environment and either police working with ICE or ICE shows up? What should they do?
So it gets really complicated, right? So because you've got in that situation really two potential individuals who might be facing consequences from ICE, and one of them is obviously the immigrant worker, and that's the individual that in my firm we're typically the most concerned with. But the other one's going to be the employer. I mean, if an employer is knowingly employing undocumented workers, that can result in heavy fines or even in jail time as well. And so you have to be really careful in that situation, because there's now a conflict of interest between the employer and the employees, even if you're talking about an employer who's been great to their undocumented employees over the years and takes care of them and wants to help them. Now their ass is on the line when ICE comes knocking. So the first thing you have to kind of remember if you are working in that type of environment is if the employer gives ICE permission to enter the premises, they're going to enter, and they're going to be able to do what it is they do.
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot that any individual can do about that. Also, if it's a raid or something like that, ICE may even be accompanied by local law enforcement, and they may have one of those warrants that's been signed by a judge, because it may actually be the employer they're investigating as much as the workers. In fact, I've personally seen cases where they've raided facilities and then tried to get the employees to flip on the employers and even offered incentives like deferred action or a temporary work permit and protection from removal for a period of time in order to bust the employer. So you never really know who they're coming for, but just know that if the employer is given permission, you're just kind of out of luck. And so what it would kind of go to for me at that point is you'd look at it as you would if someone was encountering ICE in a public space. Don't run from ICE. Don't fight back. Don't argue with them. Please never provide them with fake documents. Don't provide them with false stories or lies. Just cooperate and kind of wait things out and see what it is they're going to do.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I do have a question
Yeah.
about that, about where ICE can raid. At the beginning of this podcast, we were talking about being sick. And if you're undocumented or your status is in a weird little, situation, should you go to the doctor? And, where can you expect to find protection and be safe?
Well, I guess that depends. Currently there's and we talked about this a little bit off the air too. Currently there's a Department of Justice memo that has been longstanding, where generally Immigration and Customs Enforcement is not going to go into hospitals, also churches and schools, and I guess we can get to that later. But they're not going to go into hospitals, and so if someone's sick, if someone's injured, they need to go seek medical treatment. That's kind of
That's
going
so
to
scary.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
There's already barriers for us to get like medical attention, and then being scared to get deported because you need to go to the doctor. That's scary.
No, it's insane. But yeah, kind of going in the order of operations, take care of the most pressing thing first. Go get treatment if you're sick or injured. And then I guess, again, kind of see what happens. Unfortunately, being undocumented in the United States means that you're always at risk no matter where you are.
What would you say for like U.S. citizens or U.S. residents that if something ever happens in public and they want to do something to protect their undocumented friends or family members, like, is there any kind of like rules there? Like, can they get in trouble by intervening a little bit, whether it being just, trying to conversate with the officers, or do you know what the rules are with that?
Yeah, I do. And generally speaking, what you want to avoid is you want to avoid any situation where you're going to be interpreted as putting yourself in the middle of the arrest. You don't want to interfere with that arrest.
That's
whatsoever.
a charge, right?
That could be a charge.
Oh my God.
Or worse, right? how many times have there been incidents across the country? YouTube's full of them where.
Sometimes you just got a civil disobedience, if you know what I'm saying. Sometimes I know you won't advise against that, Nathan.
I can't advise that.
I would say, sometimes you just gotta get in between. Sometimes you gotta stop a bus,
Well, you get that feeling, and we've seen that. We've seen that even locally, and we've seen that certainly on the national level. I remember very early in Trump 1.0, I guess we can call it, where there was a woman who had been in the United States illegally for a long time and who was picked up. She had what we call, I guess, an order of supervision, where she had an order of removal, an order of deportation, but ICE had elected not to pursue it, and they were letting her stay here, but she had to check in. And she went into a check-in.
Where was this at?
In Arizona.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Really famous immigration attorney Ray Maldonado, I think, was the individual who's representing her. And like people laid down in front of the van after she was detained at her, on final check-in. I mean, those kinds of things have certainly happened. I mean, if that's what you want to risk, you don't care about your own life, go ahead.
I mean, I care about my life, Nathan,
right.
but like sometimes you just gotta do it, Sometimes
right.
you gotta. But for those that are not gonna take that kind of risk by getting arrested or whatever, you recommend just to try not, like, maybe
don't get in the middle of
film it.
Film it.
You can legally film it.
Film it. You can legally film it, especially if you're a good distance away and you're not, again, getting in the middle of the arrest. Document it in some other way if you can't film it. Write down what you saw immediately. If you know the individual, if this individual is your friend and you have contacts with their other friends and family members, make yourself available to the legal representative. Keep contact with that individual while they're detained. This is something that came up at our event on Monday night that I had not really thought about a ton, but the places that undocumented people are taken to be detained down in Louisiana are hellholes. I mean, these are just awful, awful places. And sometimes people get down there and, hey, the first few days, like, I'm going to fight this. Like, I want to get out and I want to be with my family.
Like you said, they're isolated for a reason.
Yes.
Right? A lot of these detention centers are on, like, the boonies out in Louisiana somewhere. And, like, who monitors that? Who goes to check to see what the conditions are? Who checks to see if, like, security guards are treating people the way that they should? Because a lot of the times they're not. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, my own dad that was in there, for a while, like, he told me about, like, how horrible the guards were. So I'm pretty sure that has not stopped. I'm pretty sure that the conditions remain the same. And the way that it's ran there is just, it's kind of like, what do they call it? Like an old school of running where, like, the guards run everything,
Yes, and even better than being in isolated locations and run by, an agency whose goal is to kick people out of the country and to make their lives difficult so that they want to get kicked out of the country, is that these facilities are actually run and operated by contractors, private contractors. They're not even government officials who are running them. And so you have all kinds of issues. But what I'm getting at is, if you have someone who's been down there, it may seem simple, but, like, send them letters, accept their phone call if they call you, talk them through it. Because, like I said, the first few days, sometimes people are really wanting to fight their case out. 3-4 weeks down the road, they're not so sure anymore. 5-6 weeks down the road, they may just give up. And so if they have a strong case to stop their removal and to earn some type of benefit to the immigration courts, then, keep their spirits up.
And I think that's the best thing that you could do, just because, I told you a little bit off air, but, like, when my dad was there, my dad was a very strong, brave man. But even him, when he was there, he was like, this is horrible. Like, the conditions here are bad. People are getting beat up. Some people are really, really sick. No one cares really about the people that are in here. And like I said, I don't think the conditions have gotten better. I haven't heard of the conditions getting better. So that's why I thought it was a good idea whenever that one young woman reached out at the event the other day about, like, writing letters, to incarcerated folks and just kind of lift their spirits up a little bit. And I know that that Alan was actually interested in doing something similar, but with, like, art. So that definitely will be a project that we work on in the community here. Any other? Go ahead.
What kind of people? What kind of crimes can people see themselves being taken to?
Yeah, so that's a really complicated question. Or better said, it's a great question and a complicated answer because the law has really made it difficult. But generally speaking, if you're undocumented, any crime, any traffic infraction, anything can make you subject to coming into contact with ICE and being potentially deported. Just the fact that somebody is here without status means that they're at risk, unfortunately. Now, if you're talking about someone who's here legally, if they have some type of visa that allows them to be here, or if they are even lawful permanent residents, then they typically have to have committed a crime that we would refer to as a deportable offense. And there's several different categories. And since I guess it's a podcast, we can get a little bit more into the details. But generally, certain firearms offenses are going to keep somebody, or are going to make someone subject potentially to being removed. certainly any drug offenses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even like mere possession can cause issues, much less obviously drug trafficking. And when we know how complicated that can get, right? That may just go based on how much somebody possesses when they get stopped by the police. But also a couple of really nebulous concepts that are in the law and are very poorly defined, and that would be what we call crimes involving moral turpitude and aggravated felonies. And those have been the subject and continue to be the subject of litigation for decades, ever since they first appeared in the Immigration and Nationality Act, because, like I said, they're just really poorly defined. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows what a crime involving moral turpitude is. Mm-hmm. And you might think I know what an aggravated felony is, but no one really does, because it's not the state definition that matters. It's not like, okay, I was arrested for aggravated battery in Arkansas, so that's an aggravated felony. Well, maybe not, because there's kind of a federal list, and then there's a list of different factors, and it may be even like how long the maximum sentence might be, and things like that end up impacting whether or not something's going to be an aggravated felony. And then crime involving moral turpitude is even weirder, because you have to like look at the state statute and say, oh well, this person committed a crime with a specific mental state, and then the conduct that they committed was sufficiently deplorable that we're going to say it involved moral turpitude. And like I said, it continues to be the subject of litigation. Spoiler alert, the litigation has not gone well for non-citizens. So more and more crimes are added to those two lists, I feel like, every single year.
Mm-hmm. Especially recently.
Yes.
I think just this week, they just tried to make theft.
Yeah, so theft is already one. That's a great point. You're talking about the Lake and Riley Act.
Yes.
And that is an absolute travesty.
That confused me for a little bit. When I first read it, I was like, so I guess because in some states theft isn't something that can get people in deportation proceedings?
Well, it depends on the statute, and there's always different types of theft, right? So But Lake and Riley Act goes even further. And if you were confused when you first saw it, don't feel bad. You should be confused. I'm confused. It's confusing. The law is really a pretty, or the bill at this point hasn't been passed. It's still being debated this week in the Senate. But the House has already passed it.
And it's because Lake and Riley was murdered by an immigrant.
Yeah.
And I think he had some sort of like theft charges on him before.
Yeah.
So that's how they're connecting it with.
Right. So obviously everyone
Riley.
who's ever committed theft, if they're not from the United States, is likely to go kill someone.
It's like right. Why don't they do that for school shooters? Sure. Why don't we put like some better laws in protecting people if there's certain people that are. But I guess people are always going to find a way to target immigrants to.
That was also written by in Arkansas, right? Was Steve Womack behind that?
I can't remember. I think there were multiple. I think there were people falling all over themselves to get in line to be the sponsors.
Democrats too.
Democrats as well.
Latino, Ruben Gallego.
But that's something that you,
Arizona.
as a voter, if you are registered to vote, can call, email, or anything and tell them, hey, this is very confusing. What does this mean? And maybe even sharing your own story if you've ever been charged with theft, at Target or wherever. It's something everyone, can accidentally do.
Sometimes people steal food because they're hungry, too.
Yes.
And that's what makes the Lake and Riley Act particularly egregious, because it actually doesn't require a conviction. So if most of the time here in Arkansas, if I have a client who's convicted of theft, they're deportable. And there's not a whole lot I can do about that. Most types of theft in Arkansas are going to end up on the list of at least crimes involving moral turpitude. There may be some exceptions for basic shoplifting, but most theft crimes are going to end up being crimes involving moral turpitude. Now, that being said, like I said, Lake and Riley Act just says if you were even arrested or charged with theft, you now are subject to mandatory detention. And so once ICE picks you up, you have to sit in a cell in Louisiana while your case is being adjudicated.
No real due process.
No due process whatsoever. And, you might be innocent. You may not have committed that theft, right?
Yeah.
Your kid may have dumped something in the buggy while you were at Walmart, walking around, and someone saw it, and or you forgot to check it out or whatever, and now you're going to Louisiana and potentially to whatever country you came from. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
And it's also counterproductive. because when you find yourself in deportation proceedings, there are defenses to being removed. And some of those defenses are available so long as you haven't been convicted of a deportable crime. So if you've been charged with theft, you may still be eligible to present one of those defenses if you haven't been convicted yet. And so by ICE detaining you, now you can apply for one of those defenses and you're still eligible because the state never got a chance to convict you. And so you're also not only potentially allowing people to stay, but you are also taking away from the states potentially the ability to even bring people who have committed legitimate crimes to justice.
Where is the best place for people to kind of keep up with changes in the immigration system?
Well, most of the time, immigration attorneys are reading the bills or on the Federal Register, or things like that. But there's a lot of relatively decent news sources out there. Most of your mainstream media will at least cover it, but they don't do a great job. I mean,
going into depth.
No, they don't go into depth, or even the Anglo and the Spanish sources a lot of times sensationalize things.
And I need like multiple sources to find what's true, what's happening. To whenever I'm looking up something specific, immigration related, and sometimes it takes like 3 articles to find everything that I needed.
Yeah.
So
my favorite was this H-1B visa that kind of went into the news because of Elon Musk, right? And then someone at work was like, had said something, and I was like, no, these are not people who are working at Tyson in the plants. Because they were kind of like, oh, well, I did this story about who in Arkansas employs the most H-1B visas. I expected Tyson to be number 1 on the list. And I was like, no, those are illegal immigrants that they're getting, that you're thinking about. H-1B visas are people who have degrees, So, but yeah, it's like immigration is very wide sector of things.
It's extremely wide.
And it's worldwide. It's not just one color of people, like we mentioned earlier.
Which is another crazy thing about immigration policy. There's a lot of other countries out there, like you said, it is completely worldwide. And so if we're not incorporating immigrants into our fabric and benefiting from all the different myriad of benefits that they bring, other countries eventually will get around to doing that. And we'll end up paying the price. But that's a whole other issue. But that's a great point you make about it being worldwide.
Is there any other parts of, like, for example, your presentation that you had the other day that you would like to include in this interview? I did a Facebook Live. There was several people that did Facebook Lives that day, Nathan. And apparently, like, there was too much echo on mine. So I had complaints of, like, I couldn't really hear. So I'm going to send this episode to the people that couldn't hear properly through my Facebook Live. Even though LBS's Facebook sounded pretty good. And I think it had, like, almost 50,000 views.
Yeah, it did. It had a ton. But his camera was, like, right in front
of you.
In my face.
He knows how to do it. He knows how to do it. It worked. 50,000 views and, like 600 shares he had.
Yeah.
So the Marshallese community, really wants to educate themselves on this. But is there any other things that you can think of that we didn't mention yet?
I mean, there's a lot, but it's hard to know where to start. So,
what are some of the biggest ones?
The biggest things, that I would definitely remind people, and this isn't really a know your right type issue, but just anybody who may not be a U.S. citizen at this point in time. There's some basic things that you want to consider while you're here and while you're in that pathway. First and foremost, never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, claim to be a U.S. citizen. That's one of those things that, may or may not technically be a crime, depending on the situation, the environment in which you're making that claim. But any false claim of U.S. citizenship for any potential benefit could end up making you ineligible for any immigration benefit in the future. And that's something that we run into, particularly with certain communities where people have had a history. So, you go to work, for example, and people have to work. You can't live in the state of Arkansas and not work. You'll starve to death. And so, you may go to your employer and they give you an I-9 form. And in that I-9 form, there's going to be a box that you can check saying you're a U.S. citizen. If you just check that box to get that job to feed your family, you're done. It's over. So definitely never make a false claim of U.S. citizenship. Another good point that we've also talked about off the air is, just being careful with, the amount of paperwork from your home country that you use in any encounter with ICE or even with the police. Here in Arkansas, you do have the responsibility, despite the general right to remain silent that everyone has. We do have the obligation to identify ourselves if a police officer asks us to identify ourselves. And there's a similar requirement with ICE, where when you have contact with an ICE officer, if they ask for, your immigration paperwork, you need to be able to turn that over. And so a lot of times what people will do is they'll start turning over paperwork from their home country because at least they're identifying themselves. And if you're going to use your passport or something like that, that's fine. I mean, you've got to, again, kind of like we were talking about going to the hospital, like you take care of the most pressing issue first. But the more information you give them is potentially information they can use against you. And so identify yourself and then move on. Don't do their job for them. But I've even had clients who, have, turned over their, consular ID card and then been charged with forgery by the police because they didn't realize what it was they were looking at. So it is important to be really careful about what documents.
So if someone's in a car and they're driving, they get stopped by police officers, they have the right to remain silent.
They do.
So they don't have to say anything. And then if they get asked, what does the process look like? They get asked. They get stopped by a police officer. They don't want to say anything. The police officer says, "Show me an ID." And so then you have to be careful what you show, right? And you still have to show something. If you have something, you still have to show them. That would be the best thing to do, right?
Yeah, because you don't want to. Yeah, I think it's fine to identify yourself, and the police officer has that right to ask for your identification. And furthermore, when you're stopped driving, they have the right to ask for your driver's license and your proof of registration and your proof of insurance.
So let's say, for example, someone doesn't have insurance and they don't have a proper identification. What do they do in that situation? What would be the best route for them? Don't
lie, right? At that point, don't lie. Just say you don't have it, and move on.
And then you just refer to can you be like, I want to speak to my lawyer, or
absolutely
not say anything after that point.
Say I'm not comfortable answering any other questions until I've had a chance to talk to an attorney.
And in that situation, when anybody gets involved with any undocumented person gets involved with the law, in that way. It's important for them to get a criminal attorney,
yes,
and an immigration attorney as well.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because you asked, what else do we want to talk about? That's another thing, kind of like whether you pay bail or not. The idea of who do you hire first, an immigration or criminal defense attorney, is one of those things that can be a little counterintuitive. I have people come to my office all the time who just want to talk to me because they're horrified because their family member or their friend has been arrested and they're in the Washington or Benton County jail, and they're horrified that ICE is gonna take them. Well, I can't do a whole lot right there. I can guarantee anybody listening today, you do not want me to be your criminal defense attorney. We have 3 really good criminal defense attorneys at my firm, and I can refer people to dozens of other excellent criminal defense attorneys in the metro area, but I am not one of them. And so you do not want to talk to me in that situation. Get the criminal issues figured out first, because your criminal history is going to have a massive impact on whether or not an attorney who you hire to defend you from deportation is able to defend you. Okay. So definitely. Now, you may want to be talking to an immigration attorney as you're working with a criminal defense attorney, just to make sure you understand, what the potential consequences of any plea deal might be. But you don't need to hire an immigration attorney to start preparing to represent you if you're taken to Louisiana at that point, or your loved one.
And that goes the same for if someone gets arrested and ends up at the Washington County or Benton County jail. Before you pay your bond, get an immigration and a criminal attorney.
Well, get a criminal attorney and make sure that criminal attorney is willing to talk to an immigration attorney. There's a lot of great criminal defense attorneys in the area, but there are a lot of truly great criminal defense attorneys who are more than happy to actually talk to an immigration attorney so they understand.
But you're saying situation. you can put the headache aside and just come to us because we got everything at our place, right?
Well, that's how we've set it up because of our clientele. But no, I'm not here.
I'm just saying that's an option.
It's an option.
It's an option.
But there's a lot of other great criminal defense attorneys, and there's a lot of other great immigration attorneys. We are blessed, really, in this metro area, especially for its size. I've worked in Dallas. I've worked in Kansas City. I always spend a lot of time in places like Memphis and New Orleans that have great immigration attorney bars. But for a market our size, we are blessed with a great immigration bar and a great criminal defense bar as well. There's not a whole lot of ill feelings or competition between those attorneys. They work together.
Yeah.
And, it does not have to be me. It does not have to be someone in my office, but go hire a criminal defense attorney and just make sure that attorney is going to be willing to talk to an immigration attorney.
Okay. Thank you for that information. And just for people, I never like to really be this direct with, just immigrants or undocumented immigrants when it comes to this. But me and my wife talk about this all the time. Like, if you are on DACA or if you are undocumented, just be extra careful.
Yeah.
In everything that you do. Mm-hmm. Just I know it sucks that as an immigrant, as an undocumented immigrant, sometimes you have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard to gain access to resources as a U.S. citizen. But in situations where it can lead to your deportation, just be careful. If you drink, make sure you get an Uber, all these different things, because when you get arrested, most of the time shit goes down. You can end up in a deportation proceedings from something simple as sometimes, drug charge or DWI, all these different things. So we just ask people to be extra careful. And when I'm saying this is not meant in a condescending way, it's out of love. Please take care of yourselves. Please tell your family members to take care of themselves, because we don't want you to be in these difficult situations, especially with the administration coming in.
Absolutely. And it's not fair. It's just straight up not fair. And it's not really, from my own personal opinion, morally okay that we require that of people who are here just because, and who weren't born here, and that we make those extra requirements of them. But like you said, that is kind of the reality. And it comes from a place of concern and love, not from a place of judgment. Yeah. You've got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Nathan, I appreciate you being here. I think the people, especially locally, that will be listening to this will probably be seeing you out in the community a lot in the next 4 years, just because of Know Your Rights forums and DACA clinics and all these different things that we will all be working on together. But I hope that at least this information is able to help someone just to be prepared. We have these kind of conversations not to scare people. It's about just being proactive and preparing instead of being reactionary when shit goes down. So I just appreciate you making the time to be here. Where can people find you on social media?
Unfortunately, I'm on all the social media accounts for the most part, right? I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook and TikTok, and I just use my firm's name, which is Bogart Small and Dual, or my personal name, Nathan Bogart.
Okie dokie. And we ask this question to all of our guests. What do you do to take care of your mental health?
I have a whole lot of hobbies, most of which I'm not really that good at because I have a lot. But probably the thing I do the most.
You're all right at soccer, Nathan. Come on,
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm getting older and slower. I love going to the gym. I love lifting weights.
Okay,
that's what I've done a lot in my life, and I don't know if it's just sitting there and just counting to 10 over and over and over again, but it clears my head.
That makes sense. Hey, Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Nathan, just for being here and for being a resource for the community, not only at this podcast, but, in the past few years at our DACA clinics and our forums and everything. So we really appreciate you.
No, thanks so much for the invite to be here.
And for everybody listening, that was the end of this episode with attorney Nathan Bogart, immigration attorney. So make sure you follow him on social media if you haven't yet. But that's the end of the episode. So this is Irvin.
And this is Elena.
And we're signing off.